So welcome everyone. Thank you again for attending our Bystander/Upstander training sessions today and on December 9th next week. We look forward to seeing those that attend that one as well. My name is Tiffany Dubon-Yard. I'm a student life specialist specializing in civic engagement for those of you who don't know. And I am one of the co-chairs for the Social Justice Network here at Bronx Community College. I welcome you all. Please, I ask that you remain muted. You may come into the space muted already, so please just remain muted while our presenters are speaking. If you have a question, feel free to drop the question in the chat. We will answer those questions at the end of the presentation, give you all time to ask questions. And if you would prefer to speak your question, feel free to raise your hand during the Q&A section, and we will call on you and allow you to speak your question. As you can see in the chat right now, we're just taking down some information. So if you're a student and you're here fulfilling a workshop requirement, or if you're here fulfilling extra credit for a class, please make sure that you put that in the chat so then we have evidence and have taken your attendance in that you are here present for that specifically. We also would like to get to know you. So go ahead and introduce yourself. Let us know where you're coming from. If you are faculty, staff, or student. If you're a student, what's your major? If you're faculty, staff, what's your area? What's your department? And without further ado, I would like to hand the floor over to Chanel Boyce and Charlotte Kennedy.
Okay. Oh, sorry, let me step over you, Charlotte. Thank you so much, Tiffany, for that introduction. And I'm gonna take it first and then you could introduce yourself. So today we are here to do this Native American Indian bystander guide for you all. This is our first time doing this presentation, so we are very excited about it. And first we're gonna do just a little bit of an introduction, just a short bio of ourselves, and I will let Charlotte do her intro first.
So Nishanach, hello. I am Quihish, Lower Umpqua. I'm from I'm a tribal member of the Confederated Tribes of the Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Sayusla. I do a lot of things. I do podcasting. I've done a lot of activism throughout the years. I'm a tribal artisan and stuff. I do a lot of public engagements and speakings. I love doing that. I love educating people. I think we have a lot of, today's day, Hollywood concept of what an Indigenous person is. And I like breaking those barriers and helping people to realize that the person next to them might not be who they think they are, and to be able to share my culture. And I just enjoy doing that. I have a lot of background. I will say I come from a space of domestic violence, and that has led me down a path of healing and helping others heal in their space. And it's definitely put me in the place as a bystander many times. So I'm really, really happy to be here to be able to share some of that with you. So that's it.
Thanks, Charlotte. And so for me, actually, my 9 to 5, I'm actually a practicing clinical therapist. I'm also a nurse, but my passion is, I am a community organizer and activist. And I say I'm a social worker, and I work on the macro level as well. And I always say that, my passion for community organizing, it comes from my passion for social work, and which means that a lot of times I end up doing a lot of intersectional and anti-racism education. Because a lot of times people just have no idea where to start. They want to do something and they realize that there's issues, but sometimes it's very difficult to figure out, okay, where do I get started? I want to help, but I don't know what to do. And there's a lot of difficult conversations that need to be had. And I just, a lot of times, just help people get started with those difficult conversations. There's a lot of work that goes into the fancy bios, but those are the most important things, okay? So, okay, so here are our ground rules. I always say, we have a gracious space because, we're gonna make mistakes, especially when we're learning like new information. Probably a lot of new information is gonna be thrown at you today, because we don't typically have conversations about this topic, especially if it's not your area of expertise. So we're gonna, leave lots of room for for you to make mistakes, for you to ask questions, but you're going to be responsible. So that's the next one. You're going to be responsible for the things that you say in this space. A lot of times people use the word, say this is a safe space. And I don't use that word because I can't guarantee your safety on either side. And I'm not going to say and I say that in terms of like emotional safety. So I'm not going to say that I can't guarantee emotional safety because someone might say something that might hurt your feelings or might be incorrect. And just because I say, okay, I'm going to give you lots of grace in this space because I want you to learn, doesn't mean that you're not going to take accountability for the things that you say in this space. So I want you to take accountability and I want you to learn from the things that you say. And the next thing is progressive stack. So if you're not familiar with progressive stack, all it means is that, typically in like the society, the people who are heard the most are, white, cisgender, straight, middle-aged, males, and keep going down the various intersections. So progressive stack means that we flip that on the other end, so the most marginalized people get to speak first. And that kind of goes with like the other things on listed on the end that, this is going to be a Native affirming space, queer, trans, BIPOC, Black affirming space. And the one in the middle means that pause, and it means oops and ouch. So sometimes if someone says anything when they're like engaging in this space, and if someone says something doesn't quite sit right with you, you can say oops or ouch. You can say it, you can raise your hand, or you can put it in the chat box, and then we'll stop and take that moment to address it, just so that we can make sure that everyone's having, the same learning experience. Everybody got it and agreed to the ground rules? You can just put a thumbs up. You can say yes, you can shake your head. Okay, yes. And I need everyone to agree to the ground rules. Okay, thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, wonderful. I didn't want to go. Okay, Charlotte, that's all you.
So, Ishanak Tumui, that means hello to everyone in my language, which is Kuish. And, it's not letting me move it, it looks like.
Oh, okay. There you go, sorry.
I like to start my presentations with letting everyone know what tribe that originally occupied that space, and where you are at the college, it would be the Munsee, Lenape, and the Wappinger tribe. So it's kind of neat to kind of consider who was there originally living off the land. Oh, wow, this really isn't letting me move it forward. Boop.
I'm not sure why it's giving you trouble. Let's see. Okay, there we go.
So we like to, the Indigenous like to talk about decolonizing history, and a lot of people kind of wonder why that is. And really it's about learning the real accurate story of Native history, because it's been very sugar-coated, very sweetened up. The more you learn, it's easier to understand the past and the present day issues. A lot of times I hear, well, that was in the past, you should get over it. And that's a little hard pill to swallow, because as you will see in the presentation, that the past really hasn't left us, and it's only been since like the 70s since we got our rights. So we're still trying to define ourselves. And I think this can help you understand the trauma that we've gone through, and some of the issues as a bystander and an ally, how you can be sensitive in that moment. So next, we're just winging it.
Okay, so this is a quote by Haile Selassie. If you're not familiar, this is an Ethiopian emperor. So throughout history, it has been the inaction of those who could have acted, the indifference of those who should have known better, and the silence of the voice of justice when it mattered most, that has made it possible for evil to triumph. So I put this quote in there because a lot of times, and there's been similar quotes, like MLK said something very similar about, the white moderate, because a lot of times we think it's like, the people who are, the KKK or the ones who, stormed the Capitol on January 6th, like the insurrectionists, those are the ones that, make this country, the way that it is. But a lot of times it's the people in the middle who really don't stand up. And that's what this quote is about.
Good quote. A little humor. Chewy is a Sasquatch that was colonized. His name went from chewing tobacco to Chewbacca. I just want to throw a little humor in there for you.
And I don't think I mentioned before, but if you have any questions while we're speaking, please feel free to throw them in the chat at any point and we will address them. And or raise your hand.
So now we're on to our Did You Know series. A little history, a little facts. The indigenous humans did not arrive here via the land bridge theory. This has actually been debunked several times, but it's not upgraded in school like a lot of things. So we still kind of roll with that theory. Next. So 2 recent studies, and they did a lot of hard work. They analyzed a lot of data. They went through artifacts, they did carbon dating, and they did a lot more. It wasn't just a simple little study. This took many, many years of many analysis, and they actually proved that humans lived here before the Bering Strait theory. They also proved that the Bering Strait was not passable. And it was too cold, it was not sustainable. The amount of time it would take for people to travel, even if they brought supplies, they would die before reaching the Americas. So it didn't happen that way. A lot of indigenous will tell you that we've always been here. All of our stories are that we were created here on what we call Turtle Island, which encompasses Canada, the United States, and South America. We did travel, we did trade. That's always taken out of the history books. They try to say it didn't happen, but a lot of us will say, no, we traded. That's why we have similar items. We have similar fish hooks. We have similar nets and things like that. And in our own artifacts, we have found that. So, but they like to hide it, of course, because it doesn't fit the narrative. Next. Boop. So there was 2 really good articles that I found. If you want to check that out, that's where they were, but these are reputable sources that you can look at that shows some of those studies that they did and the work that they did on that. And it's really good, interesting work to look at. Boop. Another one, which most of us probably know at this point, but some don't, is, of course, that Christopher Columbus did not discover the United States. Never did. He actually landed in the Caribbean. Columbus landed at San Salvador in the Bahamas. He actually, the first indigenous that he met was the Guanahani and the Lucoyano. And he brought a lot of diseases. The diseases weakened and nearly wiped out the indigenous. Columbus actually went along and hit all the different islands over there, checking it out, trying to look for whatever gold and all that nonsense. He did, the reality is he murdered, enslaved, and tortured and raped indigenous women. This is all actually documented. in his own writing and in like a priest. The Taino, they call it the Chronicles, where it has the dates and it chronicles everything that went on. So it's there for us to see. He went through and attacked all the islands. And despite what history tries to tell us, there were survivors. Many ran and hid in caves. They went into the jungles. And even the ones that were enslaved, they still survived. Yes, many were wiped out, but they still survived. They're still here today. I'm actually married to a Taino, so he's very, the whole family line historically, they actually protect certain caves because they know that's where the ancestors' artifacts are, and nobody's even allowed to go there. So it's kind of an interesting thing to dive into, but boop. And this would be him, Bartolome de las Casas. He kept a journal and he reported all the atrocities. And it's very, it hurts to read it. It's very traumatic, very awful, the things that happened to the people that he saw. And it really bothered his soul. And this was almost like, he was a very big influence on them, like almost like they hold him in high esteem because of the work that he did do to try to save them. He didn't stand by quietly. For a while he did, but he couldn't handle it anymore. I could understand being in his position when you have ruthless soldiers around that just will kill anybody, you know, it would be hard to stand up. So the fact that he did stand up is a huge deal to a lot. And many wouldn't have survived if it wasn't for him as well. So, boop. So some people don't know, but Columbus was actually in prison, yay, and he was tried in 1500 in Spain. It was based off of Bartolome's testimony, but it was also based on the citizens because it wasn't just the indigenous. This wasn't just the indigenous, this was also the citizens. They were very, very brutal to the citizens. If you didn't listen, you didn't follow, you didn't do what he wanted, and he had a brother or two, that was it. You would be killed or in prison. He was very, very cruel in his dealings with people, and it reached Spain, and when he went back on his trip back, they threw him in prison.
A question for you, Charlotte. It was like, where can one look into the journal and chronicles?
I do know that there's a book. I think you would have to Google his name, but I know they've translated it.
Right, and I know a lot of this is new to folks, but if you do look it up, the information is there because it is becoming more widespread knowledge. And I know that if you look up, like, was Columbus imprisoned, a lot of this information will come up because it is documented. Once you know that he was in prison, then it kind of comes up. There's lots of documentation about why he was imprisoned because Bartolome had all the information and records as to why he was imprisoned. So, and this is what we talk about when we talk about the whitewashing of history.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I was going to say. The strange thing in Europe, in Spain and Italy, they don't understand why we celebrate Columbus. I have a friend from Italy that I grew up with, and she's like, it's so weird. I don't get it, you know? So it was, but I have more explanation on that soon. So boop. We actually have our own contact stories. Many of our tribes, especially on different coasts, not so much in the middle regions, but on the coast. My own tribe, we definitely traded with different, like the Chinese came, and in our regalia, we actually have coins that predate, like they're in museums. It's kind of weird to us that we see that because we're like, they weren't the first. We also have documentation of Vikings coming everywhere. There's even indications of like Australia So it wasn't just that. We had Hawaiians as well, even though they weren't considered an empire, there was a queen, and they did make it over to the West Coast. So they are not the first. We even have a celebration in my tribe where we traded with like the Danish, and some intermarriages happened during that point. But if you look all along, even in like Alaska, Washington, even California area, there was contact way before Columbus ever came around. So it's kind of a silly thing when we see these massive celebrations. Boop. I guess we're just gonna boop through the whole thing. I wanted to share a little bit of we just had Thanksgiving, so I wanted to share a little bit of there's a couple different Thanksgiving stories, but this is the one that really stands out. In 1637, the colonist army surrounded a fortified Pequot village on the Mystic River. When the sun rose, everybody was sleeping. The soldiers came in and just massacred. It was approximately 700 Native Americans. There's more to this story. It wasn't just that they massacred them. They were actually holding up their heads, chopped off. They were kicking them around like a soccer ball. It was like really awful. And there was a lot of children. There's a lot of elders, mothers and that sort of thing. They did not care who. They just wanted to kill them and get rid of them. So the governor of Massachusetts turned it into Thanksgiving. And he said, this day forth shall be a day of celebrating Thanksgiving for subduing the Pequots. I need to stop for just half a second here and kind of put it in a different perspective. In our storybooks, our history books growing up, the natives were savages. They were horrible people that just tried to massacre for no reason. Well, the truth of the matter, it would be like someone breaking into your apartment, someone breaking into your house, and just coming in and taking whatever they felt was valuable and then killing you, raping your mom, raping your daughter, your sister, and just taking your land and kicking you off, or coming through and just burning your property, just taking everything. Of course, you're going to fight back. You're not going to allow people to do that to you. This is your life, So were we savage? Maybe, because we were defending ourselves. We were trying to save our children. We were trying to save our grandmothers, we were trying to just live. And we had people come in that just said, no, this is mine, you got to go. And if not, we're going to kill you. So of course there was a battle. There's always two sides to every story. So a lot of the villagers, a lot of these stories, they also, like later on, the government sold land before they removed the Indigenous. So people would travel out west thinking this is my land, thinking everything's okay, but they didn't remove the Indigenous quite yet, or they got the majority and put them into a prisoner camp, usually at the forts or on a reservation. But there was still people trying to fight for their land and to feed their families, because you have to remember, we didn't have grocery stores back then. We had to go hunting. We had to go gather berries. We had to go gather roots. Our medicines were in the plants, and that's the only thing we knew. So yes, we were fighting for our lives. And if you look at it that way, you could understand where the contention is. But you can also understand some of the settlers, because they were bamboozled. But by the time you move clear across the country to live, you're going to fight for that because you already paid for that. You think that's yours now, So, and plus it's at that point during that time, it was either you or me. So I get the contentions, but we have to look at it in a different perspective than what was presented to us in the past. So, boop. So as I was saying that a lot of tribes were removed from their lands and given to the settlers, the prisoner camps that they made actually turned into, for a lot of tribes, the reservations that we have today. And a lot of these lands were considered, you couldn't grow anything. It wasn't valuable. There was nothing there. That's why they gave it to them, because they couldn't profit off of it or live off of it. It wasn't sustainable. The crazy thing is, though, that now that they found uranium, now that they found oil, and stuff, now the land is valuable. So today's date, right now in present history, we're fighting for our land again because they're trying to take our land for all these minerals and sort of thing. A lot of lands have had to buy back, or a lot of tribes have had to, I misspelled there, I apologize. Other tribes had to buy back their lands. My own tribe, we did have to do that for part of it. But recently, in the last handful of years, we fought against the military, and we did get back a piece of land that we had negotiations on for about, I don't know, 80 years. And we did, weirdly, we've never understood what happened, but Trump just gave us a piece of our land, which was actually from my tribe. We didn't ask for it back yet. So it was a little strange. We think it had something to do with the oil, the pipeline, the LNG that they were trying to run through. So it makes it easier if it's indigenous land to destroy it, because we still don't really have the same rights as other people. We still have trouble voting. In 2017, there was a Rosebud Sioux tribe. They were just getting voting machines on their reservation, which is crazy. And some people, for the first time in their lives, and they're in their 80s, got to vote for the first time. And it doesn't seem like that'd be a big deal, but it's still happening. In the last election in the Lakota reservation, they tried to subdue them again and said, well, you can't vote unless you have a certain type of address. You have to have actual street name. So the entire tribe had to take and make official the street, like make names up in about 3 weeks worth of time before voting started. It was a huge hassle. And then everybody had to change their tribal ID. So there was a huge scramble just to be able to vote in the presidential election, which is totally crazy. There was a lot of things that weren't legal until the 70s. AIM, the American Indian movement, had a big part of that. And they did take over certain things. It was armed. They had to really assert their authority to be able to just get simple rights. Even up until the 70s, it wasn't legal to intermarry with a white person in many areas. Like the voting, again, wasn't legal until the 70s, but a lot of people don't realize that. And that is why AIM came about, because our rights were so suppressed. We didn't have the regular rights that other people were able to obtain in the 40s, 50s, 60s. Ours didn't come until the 70s. I will say that the civil rights movement did give us the strength to push in the 70s to do that. Right now, schools and medical facilities are subpar. So when the government votes on their little funding, what's going here and there, Medicaid and all that other stuff, they go through a pie, and this, goes to the states, this does the federal, and this. We get the tiniest sliver. We are the very, very last. There is a reservation that doesn't have medical, and the nearest hospital is almost an hour away. And if you think about that, if you're having a stroke, a heart attack, you're probably not going to make it. because by the time the ambulance gets there and gets out, you're not going to make it. And once again, for that reservation, that's like over by Pine Ridge, they don't have access to jobs because they were placed so far away, and there's only one tiny town next to them, and most of it is just alcohol. And there's a lot of illegal bringing alcohol in, and when you don't have a job and you can't provide for your family, the government says you have to have running water and you have to have heat in your house, but there's no money to do that, no job to do that. A lot of depression comes in. And then if you look at all the other trauma that they have experienced, it's caused a lot of problems for them. And just to fight, just to have a good school, just to have medical care is so hard. And I know a sister right now who is working on drug and addiction rehabilitation, and it is so difficult. They just don't have the money for it, so there's no interest in helping. So she has to find outside funds, and it can be really difficult at times. And it's like third world out there. They go and they shoot up her car, they bust out her windows, they threaten her family, but she doesn't stop. So she has my heart. But those are some of the battles some of us face. My tribe has been a little bit luckier in that regard because we do have cities and things like that around. And we were confederated, we were federally recognized in 85. So we saw the examples of other tribes and the struggles they went through. So we circumnavigated that. We had examples. So we said, we don't want to do that. We'll do it this way. So in some ways we were a little bit more blessed, but okay, boop, next.
Charlotte, I don't remember if you talk about this at a later point, but can you like speak, because I don't know if people like understand like what happens if you're not federally recognized, and like, do you talk about that later?
No, I don't, and I can real quick.
Yeah.
So federal, it doesn't change. Okay, my opinion, whether you're federally recognized or not, you are still Indigenous. Like the Taino is not recognized. With recognition,
is she going out for everyone else too?
Yeah.
Yes.
Able to
Charlotte, you're going in and out.
That's about it, really, honestly. So they can help with like the medical. They can help
Charlotte, if you can hear me, try turning off your camera for a second. And then you can, and try speaking then, because sometimes it lags when you have a camera on and you're trying to speak at the same time.
I don't think she can hear.
She's freezing and lagging, so she's
Yeah,
probably not.
I don't think she heard us. I think.
Am I okay now? It could be, let's see something.
I just texted her. Hopefully she'll come back.
Could be.
Charlotte, if you can hear me, turning off your camera and
We'll mute her for a second, just so we can hopefully get through that.
Let me go on my phone then. Hold on.
Yeah, maybe you have to switch devices, Charlotte. We'll come back because I know we'll come back to her slides because she had two more. Okay, so, well, hopefully we resolve those technical difficulties. We just thought really important. Like this back, these things at there's not a lot of courses. Even when I went to school, we don't education system. So we figured that you need to understand why it's important to, like, you know, be an ally, or just to even understand like why bystander intervention is important for this particular community, and why it's important to actually like do your own research and understand what is the historical context for this community. And you know, I think a lot of times we talk about what's whitewashing is, but I don't think we understand like how widespread it is. And there's a completely different narrative that we've learned, and that it's so different from even what other countries learn about, you know, Native people. And that if we don't do our own education, then, you know, it's, in some ways, and people sort of like, you know, ignorance is bliss, but it really isn't, because we're also enabling like this, you know, this culture of, you know, white supremacy to continue if we don't educate ourselves. Okay. And all right, so what is a bystander? Anyone in the community who witnesses or is aware of a behavior that could lead to harm. I mean, could learn because how we define harm is what differentiates by.
Chanel, we're losing you too. You're coming in and out. If you can hear me. We have Charlotte back.
Yes, I had to join using my phone. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah, we're actually having the same issue now with Chanel. So
I'm back. I got kicked out.
oh,
Oh my goodness. I don't know.
so sorry.
I completely got kicked out, and I was talking and didn't even realize that.
Well, we heard you, and it was sort of the same situation that was happening with Charlotte.
Sometimes
You were coming
technology
in and out.
is not our friend.
No,
Might be a little Zoom issue, actually, if it's both of us. That's weird because
That's okay.
I'm in Pennsylvania, she's New York.
Yeah, we're in completely different places, so I have no idea.
right.
But it is saying the internet connection is unstable, so I'm not sure why. I work from home, so usually my internet connection is fine. Okay, I think we're okay. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, all right, let's try this again. Okay, so we'll go back to your part, Charlotte. Let me just get through this.
That's fine, go ahead.
Okay, so what is harm? And I'll say how we define harm, it really is what differentiates bystander intervention from neighborhood watch. And I really want to talk about this like example, and I use the Trayvon Martin example in this case, because, you know, it's the most infamous like case I think of like this generation. It's like, okay, you see a supposedly suspicious, you know, Black male walking through a neighborhood, and they thought that he was, you know, going a harmful act.
Looks like she's breaking up again.
Yeah.
And this time, you know, been, you know, we can have your own family that have been filed, and yeah. And my internet connection is
Really weird.
Shana, I mean, just try turning off your camera for a second too. If anything.
Okay. Doesn't make it back in a second. I'll try to.
Yeah, I'm really sorry, y'all. never happens. I'm wondering if it's Zoom, because this is,
Yeah.
because I use my computer all day, and my internet connection says it has all bars. So I just switched to my hotspot, and then we'll just see if that makes any difference.
Yeah, that's what I was using, was hotspot. So I found that strange.
Yeah, so we'll see. And we still have so much more to say. So, okay, let's do this one more time. Because my next move is gonna go to light some sage. That's gonna be my next move. Okay. All right. So I think everyone gets the gist of what I was saying. Okay, go ahead, Charlotte.
Okay, one of our big problems today is that there's a high percentage of Native women going missing and murdered all across, everywhere from Canada to the United States to Mexico. A lot of this has to do with present day colonization tactics of like the oil industry, the pipelines. In South America, it's a lot of when the United States made agreements with South America, like Mexico and stuff, to do, trade and stuff, a lot of it also was farmed vegetables and fruits and things like that. That caused a problem because they started cutting down the trees and deforesting everything. And in the process, they were removing the indigenous that lived there. But it wasn't just a removal. It's an everyday battle, an everyday fight for them. And it's very brutal as well. We have seen examples of them kidnapping the women, killing, just total brutal, just using machetes. They would cut off the men's, and still do, I say it in past tense, I don't know why. They would cut off their arms or their legs so the men couldn't fight, that they couldn't protect the women anymore. Then they'd go after the women. The women have stepped up really, really hard to fight. And it's been beautiful, but sad, because usually every leader that leads ends up dead. They assassinate them. Here in the United States, there is sex trafficking. On the West Coast, they actually end up on ships. Towards Canada, it does go back and forth between the United States and Canada. And survivors, the ones that have gotten away, have actually said, excuse me, even the police are involved in this. And so they have no place to turn. They can't ask for help, because they'll be walking down the street on their way home. A police officer pulls up, they end up in the back of a car, and all of a sudden they're drugged at a hotel and they're being sex trafficked. It's been kind of difficult for us to gain our rights also, because every reservation, every tribe, it's considered it's like a sovereign state. It's like its own little country. It has its own laws. Yet we also go by federal and state laws as well. And we've had many years where we can't connect the laws that we have. So the men have realized that they can go onto indigenous lands, they can rape the women, and then they could go off the border back into United States territory, non-indigenous territory, and they never get prosecuted. And Biden did help pass a bill to try to help with that. It's under evaluation. I don't know. I don't know why you need an evaluation to try to save women from being raped, but our hope is that it will be federally recognized everywhere, so women don't have to go through this anymore. It happens also a lot when they do the drug trafficking, is they'll either grab our youth who really want to have money and they see things on TV and on social media, and they get lured into that life. You know, it's attractive because they have things. So then they get someone off the reservation say, well, if you bring us women, we'll pay you. Or if you bring us, you know, you run these drugs in, we'll pay you. And they get caught up in that and they forget themselves, they forget their families and their values, and money becomes the goal. And unfortunately, it ends up being a lot of women, but not just women. It's also the two-spirit community. We call like the LGBTQ community, we call them two spirits, and they also suffer this as well. And a lot of times young kids, so is a lot of trauma that goes through the community because of this. Boop, if you can move that.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people are just like so in shock that there's all these things happening, but it's purposeful, right? Because if you don't know what's happening, then you can't be an advocate to like help make sure these things are not happening. Mm-hmm. So, you know, now you're learning all these things. Make sure you tell your friends, you tell your colleagues, you do your own research, and you help spread this knowledge, and you become an advocate so that these things can stop happening and we can pass the right laws and so on and so forth. Because I know
it's not just our community experiencing this, it's all communities of color are experiencing this. And it's really scary because it seems like no one cares. But I'm going to let you know why. And hopefully no black vans show up. But at the end of the day, this is very Epstein. This is very, you have a lot of people in Washington, D.C., a lot of important people, a lot of people of money that are complicit with this, that this is who they're serving. So they're not going to try to bust it up because they're part of it. So that's a huge problem. People are making crazy money. They go under different business names, corporation names, and it looks legit, but then they're handing them money for their next election. So, and then they're going to parties and they have these young girls. I mean, we've seen this several times throughout history, recent history, but yet we keep, closing a blind eye to it. I mean, it's not all of them. It does happen just local community wise, but I'm going to be honest. I had a friend who used to serve one of the mayors in our town, and he did it willingly, but there were others who didn't. And if it can happen in your own hometown, it can happen anywhere. So it's a little scary to see, but this is happening in every community. So if you fight for your own community, you also fight for mine. We can work together on that. But all right, I'm sorry. I'll go on a tangent all day.
No, I think it's important. I think that a lot of times, it goes back to what we were saying in the beginning about, it is happening everywhere. And I think that a lot of people do know about it, but it's like, okay, it's not something that's directly affecting me. And a lot of, it's like good white folks, a lot of times it's like, okay, that's happening over there. And sometimes people think it's not happening in their community. And people who do know, it's like, I'm not going to touch that. It has nothing to do with me. And they don't think it's their responsibility because we don't. America's not really a lot about, community responsibility, but we have to realize that, these are our communities, these are our children, and we have to take responsibility for everything that's happening around us. Yeah, exactly what Tiffany said. If it doesn't come knocking on our own front doors, then they don't care.
Yeah.
Okay.
So here's some of the facts, and I'm presenting some of this because you'll see why this kind of pulls into the bystander. So 4 out of 5 Indigenous women are affected by violence today. This is on reservation and off reservation. Homicide is the 3rd leading cause of death between the ages of 10 and 24. Homicide is the 5th leading cause of death of ages 25. Oh, I messed that up a little bit. I think that was supposed to be for men, because it's not just women that experience this. Men also experience abuse, and men also experience homicide. 5,712 known counted cases in the United States government. The government only reports 116, but we've tracked 5,712. But the number is much bigger than that. These are, just like they say with rape cases, most women don't report. It's the same. Like I was saying, if the police are complicit, how are you going to report this? You can't, you know, you're not safe, because that could have been his buddy who did it, you know? So a lot of us don't report. And plus sometimes it just opens a whole can of worms and years of a trial and dealing with lawyers and stuff, and you just want to get on with your life and try to heal. And you have to take care of your kids. You have to work. You don't, fear factors in. So these cases are not being reported, yet the government really does not care. The government only looks at a couple cases and pretends like that's the actual number, and that is not the truth. Beep.
Yeah, and we know there's been lots of instances, especially in the last few years, we've seen with police brutality, and when they've looked at the numbers, they said like the federally reported numbers don't match just even the cases that we've heard about in the media, because we know the police departments were just not reporting, like there's no reporting guidelines. And so they don't have to report them, you know, just to the federal government.
You know, I tried to report an incident in Binghamton, and I never got to report it. I never got to report it. They sent me over here to over there to the DA to this. They just kept me going in a circle for about 6 months until I gave up.
Right.
So
and I had my own experiences. They'll harass you, you know, like, and,
oh yeah,
and
I got pulled over, all kinds of stuff. Yep.
they harassed me so much, and you know, Binghamton is where I live, and until the point that I just had to change my license plate. It got that bad. And
Wow.
I'm a single woman who lives alone, single mother. So, you know.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Some of this I kind of already hit on. The border towns of oil fields, there is a much higher rate of these incidences. You will constantly see us fighting. Well, probably not reported in media, but if you do, you'll see we're fighting because we don't want that around. And the oil industry knows about it. They do nothing to protect us. They don't help us at all. They kind of perpetuate it, you know, the companies. So it's a huge battle. It's not just all about the oil, all about saving our waters and our lands. Some of it is about saving our women and our children. And yeah, it's tough. Again, the jurisdictional issues. There's also a huge problem too when it comes to search and rescue. It could take like a month before they decide to search. Well, a month goes by, it's too late. 99% of those, they don't ever find them, or if they do, they're already dead. It actually takes community organization to go out and find. It has worked sometimes, but a lot of times because you're crossing a border, nothing is happening. You can't cross that border, and you can't go onto people's property legally and search for your loved one, even though you know they might be there. I have seen in Canada where they have started going into certain districts where there's a lot of homeless and abandoned homes, and they have formed their own coalition, and they go in, they kick in doors, they get their daughters back. They don't play around. And it's very dangerous. It can be very dangerous, but they will go and find their family members. They have also gotten boats to dredge the rivers and look for the bodies, because it's a common area where they would dump the bodies, and they would go on searches for bodies along the river or any clues. So if they find a purse of a woman, they would turn that over to the police. But of course, nothing ever happens, you know, in that regard, but at least they're trying to do something for the community. Now, this is really big, and I feel like we all need to pay attention to this. because it can happen to anyone. Being lured through social media. A lot of victims have been lured through that. Sounds like a nice guy, and you could legit talk to the person using chat or whatever. And but their end goal is to get you a loan eventually, gain your confidence, get you a loan, and that's going to be the last time your family sees you. And this has happened to a lot of people. And I think we don't talk. I think, Facebook is in a lot of trouble for things. And I think they try to hide that a lot of this does come through Facebook. And the news doesn't report on it. They're all complicit in this. And this is a huge thing. So why am I telling you this? Because you guys are in college and you're enjoying your life. And this is a time you explore and you meet friends, and we're all very active on social media. So we do need to stay vigilant, because it has happened a lot where even just getting simply raped or a wackadoo beats you up or something. So you really need to pay attention to who you're talking to and to be safe about it. My neighbor, actually, their daughter, the FBI had to come to their house because the daughter was talking to someone, and he was trying to lure her out of the home. And she was 16. She was old enough to know better. They had those talks with her. So it can be very scary. Not saying you're 16, but it can happen, and it does happen. We've already talked about these one of the other things is, believe it or not, with taxi services and even Uber is becoming a problem for a lot of Indigenous people and other people as well. It's not just Indigenous people. In Canada, it's a huge problem, but we have seen, like with the ride share programs and stuff like that, it's starting to become a little bit of an issue. So you have to be really safe, let people know where you are, what you're doing, the direction you're going in, try to figure out ways to be safe. There was a woman who has won awards in Canada. Her daughter was almost taken, and it made national news. And she now has developed a rideshare program for Indigenous women, so that way they can have safe rides, because her daughter, and they didn't want to arrest the man. They were trying to protect him, and he was legit from a real taxi service. And this has been a problem. And the scary thing was, she was in a group, and the two other girls got away, but she got stuck in the taxi, and she scratched him up. She broke her nails, and she was like, I was going to die that night or something. She knew it. And it was caught on recording her screaming and pleading for help as the taxi drove away. So, I mean, it does happen. It's real. So I don't know. It's a little, it gets to me. Sorry. It feels like you're not safe sometimes, no matter what you do. But,
right. Which is why they always recommend that you share your ride. Like, there is that option to always make sure you share it with someone trusted to make sure you get to your location. Because this is not just happening, in Canada. This happens all over the country, and there's been lots of cases of it. So if you're a part of a vulnerable population, you make sure you do what you have to do to protect yourself. Okay. Let's see, where are we? Oh, yes, this one.
Okay. I don't know if any of you guys have seen the reports that did hit international news that they were finding bodies of the children in boarding schools. So what happened is, this is a little bit of a personal story, so sorry. After they came and took our lands and they divided it up, they had to keep going. It wasn't enough. So what they did is send soldiers to our homes and take the children away in the 1800s and into the 1900s. They didn't use soldiers then, it just had become a practice. But they did take the children, and they would move them very, very far away. So they couldn't go home. And A lot of them ended up here in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. And, but this happened everywhere in Canada and the United States. It was like, it seemed like a joint effort at the same time. And a lot of children died in the care, and it was from abuse. It was not just from TB, tuberculosis. They would say that a lot, or pneumonia, something like that. No, they died from starvation. They died from a lot of things. I have Grandma Shingoose that's in Canada, and one of her best friends who was in a boarding school with her remembers a nun throwing a baby in the furnace next to her, a live child. A lot of them saw the death of their own people. When they brought the children to these schools, they would cut their hair, and our hair is sacred to us. And we would only cut our hair when somebody died. So when they cut the hair, a lot of the children thought that their family members died and they couldn't be with them. They weren't allowed to speak their own language. They weren't allowed to have anything that would identify them as Indigenous, not a necklace, not their regalia, nothing. They wanted to take anything Indigenous away. They were punished severely if they were found speaking their language or singing a song or doing a dance. There was a lot of molestation that happened. There was a gentleman who remembers as a teen putting his bed by the door, so when the priest came in the middle of the night, they would take them instead of the little kids. So we still live with that trauma today. I have an ancestor that I found that is buried at Carlisle Indian School. Her name was Ellen Macy, and she was made to be a house servant. Now, this is the other thing a lot of people don't know about the boarding schools. It wasn't just the school. They would send us to homes to do housework or work on farms, to basically be your slave for free as a child. And she died at the age of 12, and she died alone. And right now we're in the process of getting her home. We're working with the Army to get her disinterred. We're hoping this summer we can do it. The Arapaho Nation was one of the ones that were the first ones to find them at Carlisle, their ancestors at Carlisle, and start this process about 15 years ago. And in my search to find out how to work with getting my relative home, I found the girl that was responsible for that, and we've become very close. And we've come to understand that from the abuses of the school and the removal of our identity and our culture, they tried really hard to remove that and break families up, because that's just, I don't know, it's just evil. I can't even really explain why they would do that just because you want someone's land. I don't understand. But we have seen that a lot of generational trauma we've endured, everything from abuse in the home to drugs and alcohol, is a direct result from the boarding schools. And for many years, families have said, I had a loved one who went there and never returned, and I don't know where they are. And these schools, the Army and the government said, you're crazy, and we don't know, and we don't care. And it was only this year that they really started to care, only because we had to put an international spotlight on it. And thanks to technology, if we didn't have the technology, we would not have found the babies. So finding the babies, it started out as 215 that they found, and now it's in the thousands. I think it's over 4,000 unidentified mass graves unidentified bodies. There's many mass graves of these children. And we're working in Canada and the United States to identify them if possible and return them home. And I feel very blessed that I can get my relative, she would have been my great aunt, and take her home. I'm lucky. Not everybody has that opportunity. And we're happy that we're going to bury her with her parents. I feel a special connection because after the boarding school, the next step was to take children and put them in foster care and put them out for adoption. And that's my story. I was put in foster care, 8 years old. I was adopted out into a white family. They were told lies. And so they tried to keep me from my Indigenous side, which by the time you're 8, you already know who you are a little bit, you know? So there was a lot of clashing, and it wasn't easy growing up. But I was able to reconnect when I was 20 with my family and enroll my children and me, and have gotten to the point where I've learned my culture, and I'm now on the language committee. So reconnecting when they tried to remove me and then finding my ancestor has been a huge emotional thing, grieving process, healing process. Is so hard to explain, but it's been really an amazing journey to go on. And I really hope that we can get her home, and maybe I could come back and share that story with you guys sometime. But so there's more to this. So we'll move on. I'm sorry, but that's my.
Okay. Thank you, Charlotte. I know that that's very emotional for you, and it's, been a very long journey for you. So,
Yeah.
but I'm glad that it's almost there for you. Okay, so just a moment, because that's a lot. Okay, so where did the study of bystanders begin? So basically, this is the case of Kitty Genovese. This is the thing that prompted, researchers to actually start to study bystander intervention. So in 1964 in Queens, New York, actually, Kitty Genovese, she was stalked and she was stabbed, in her apartment in Queens. So they actually realized that it was like 38 individuals who either saw or heard the attack, and no one did anything. So, she was like, either they heard her in the courtyard or, they heard her screaming, and there were so many different things, people heard different parts of the attack, and either the different things that were said, it was like, oh, they figured that someone else would hear what was happening and someone else probably called 911. Everyone else basically just passed the buck. They just kept passing on the responsibility that someone else was going to intervene. So this thing just became like this whole international, story. And because they were like, how could this many people, hear someone literally dying and no one do anything? And they just like, okay, if just one person out of the 38 individuals chose to do something about it, then maybe she wouldn't have died. So then, from that point on, social scientists chose to start researching the bystander effect. And basically the bystander effect showed that, the more people that, witness some kind of, attack or any kind of intervention, that they're less likely to engage or try to intervene because they think that someone else is going to, do something about it. So then, bystander intervention, trainings kind of started from that point, and hopefully, people would start to, do things about it. Microaggressions. So you want me to go through this, Charlotte, just to give a few?
It's just real quick type of thing.
Okay. Okay. So, these are just some, microaggressions. A lot of times we don't realize, that we kind of have these things in our vocabulary and we say these kinds of things. We don't realize where they come from. So, lazy, just people like receiving handouts and things like that. Especially, it's even more offensive because, we are all on native land and there's no such thing as a free handout. Everything has come at such a grave price that they're, untrustworthy, undeserving of assistance, primitive. Charlotte gave a very good, explanation of, why that's just, so egregious, alcoholic, addict. And you have to realize that there's a lots of, intergenerational trauma when we talk about, just Native history, and that, we're all complicit in all of this. Poor communicators, experiences are not valid. We have to look at who's, telling the stories. Because in this case, the victors are the ones who tell us, they are writing the history books, and they're not the one. And then obviously they get to form the narrative, and so these are all different like microaggressions. I think there's another page. So, and these are the ones that make sure you remove them from your vocabulary. I think a lot of us probably grew up saying these things. I hope you're not still saying these things, but if you are, then these are the things that you need to make sure you immediately stop saying these things. Indian giver, let's have a powwow. Okay, chief, but I'm honoring you. My insert, family member was a insert tribe named Princess. I have Indian blood. I'm a quarter insert tribe, name. A lot of times people say these things, and I know that it's kind of come like a cultural thing in America, and these are like big microaggressions. Actually, I hate the word microaggressions because they're just huge no-nos. We know better than to do these things. But these are like, it's cultural appropriation, and it's disrespectful to these to people who are actually Indigenous, because that's not your culture. And I think we have good understanding around what culture appropriation is, but for some reason it has not extended into like what into what is like Native and Indigenous culture. So I'm just gonna go back to like the comments. People don't do anything because they're telling to mind their business. Yeah, so we're trying to like help people understand like you have to like develop a community of care, and that's the only way that we're gonna have a different like society. So bystander intervention is a completely different way of thinking of things. I know that we as Americans, we don't really have a collectivist society. And that we really teach people like, personal responsibility, a lots of like, pull yourself up by the bootstrap. But we have to realize that that has been ingrained in us, and it is actually like counterproductive, and it reinforces, narratives of like white supremacy, and it completely erases like the impact of oppressive systems and, the whitewashing of history and things like that. So you have to realize that, society kind of, teaches us these certain things, and that they're counterproductive if we really want to, reimagine the kind of world. It's difficult. It's difficult to unlearn all of these things, but if we want something different, we have to do something different. I think, we all heard the quote, like the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting, different results. So, okay. Okay, so where are we? Okay, this is, I think, a big one that I don't know why, and it's so cringy to me, but a lot of times people still say spirit animal. And this is like something that's deeply cultural and sacred. That's the word I was looking for. Sacred, like for Native and Indigenous people. So don't use that. Don't use it. And I think that this, the whole like that was in the past and I'm not responsible for the past is something that is used a lot by, white folks, honestly, to distance themselves. But we have to realize that even if it did happen in the past, there are definitely like certain privileges that you have inherited based on what has happened in the past. And that even if, there is like that particular system doesn't still exist, it still exists in different ways. So, okay, slavery no longer exists, Jim Crow no longer exists, but we still have mass incarceration. It just looks different. So, and then we can go on and on and on as to like different ways in which like just the system has, you know, has evolved, and they still exist just in different ways. And what was the other one? And then what does my dream mean? Of course, oh my gosh, yes, what does my dream mean? I thought you don't have to pay taxes, and don't you get free college though? Okay, I think hopefully everybody understands why those are all offensive. And if you don't, you can write it in the chat box and we can go into those. But lots of things I think that sometimes they're just deeply embedded into like American culture, and we have to just realize that if we take a step back and look at the things that we're saying, then we can just be like more mindful and make sure that, you know, we're not saying things that are really offensive. And, you know, we know better, we do better. That's really just what it is. Okay, more and more. This one I think really is just like, okay, just like very stereotypical things. People think that, you know, Native or Indigenous people all present in one way, and there's just a certain way that, you know, they look, that there's no particular one way to be Native, there's no particular one way to be Indigenous. And I think it's even more important because we have to realize that a lot of people of color, just by the very nature of like being in this country, is that they were torn away from their culture. So it's even more offensive to think that, you know, they should look one way or should present a certain way because, you know, they were taken away from their culture, their language was stripped from them, and so on and so forth. Okay, so, and we're like kind of interweaving these things throughout the whole presentation, because a lot of times we don't really understand like, you know, what harm is or what could be offensive. So you have to be able to like kind of recognize, you know, what the historical like harm is and the trauma and the context of all these things, so that you can understand when you need to intervene or what kind of situations to look out for. Okay, so what impacts the likelihood of a bystander intervening? And I think this is a big one. And so like that was the first thing I kind of like said. It was like, okay, what's the ability to recognize harm? You have to actually be aware of the problem to be able to do something about it. So you have to be aware of the problem and recognize the negative impact on the victim or on the person, so be able to do anything. And the second one is being asked. So sometimes if someone asks you to help, then you're far more likely to intervene than those who are not being asked. But that's not always the case. Someone doesn't always say, I need help, can you please help me? And then role models, people who witness, you know, interventions are more likely to effectively intervene in the future, but that's not always the case. Sometimes like it's your very first time intervening, you've never seen someone do it, but you need to sometimes step out there because then someone might see you intervene, and that's how we create a culture of like bystander intervention. That makes sense. I'm not looking at the chat box. So just someone let me know if someone writes anything in there. Okay, and I have to change this to the side, I think. Okay, and then group size. And this is like, you know, what I talked about before with Kitty Genevieve's case, is that just if there's a bigger group, people sometimes just history and research has shown us that they're just far likely to intervene just because of the size of the group. And I can't figure out how to make this. All right, here we are. Okay, just checking time. Okay, so Cornell University did a little study when they just had to watch a video, and they were just far more likely to intervene just based on like them watching the video. Let me check the time. Okay, I think that, yeah, we do have a little bit of time. Okay, we just want to, it's just 2 minutes of it that we're going to see.
Do you know that? Hey, do you know her?
Yeah, that's Rachel.
You might want to check on her. She looks out of it.
Oh, okay. Hey, Carl, how's it going? Yeah, I'm having a really good time. This is Corey. He's in the study group. We're good.
Hey.
I'm gonna get you some water. Hey guys, look at Rachel. She's wasted. I don't think she knows what she's doing. She looks blacked out right now.
Yeah, I saw them doing shots earlier.
Maybe she wants to hook up with him. I've heard her mention him before.
He's cute.
Maybe she does, but she's too drunk to know what's going on.
I think he knows it.
We can't let them go upstairs. Why don't we take her to the bathroom?
We should distract him. Huh?
Rachel, we have to tell you something. Come to the bathroom with us.
Hey, Corey, play some ball with us. We need you on our team, bro.
This is taking forever. It'll be worth it. These guys always throw good parties. Thanks for getting me to come out tonight. Of course, glad you could make it. You're really gonna like Dave. Wait for Keisha. What's going on?
She can't come in.
Why?
Sorry, we're full.
Seriously? Wait. It's not letting her in because she's black. Are you kidding me? If you guys want to go in, go ahead. No, we don't want to be here without you. Come on, let's go someplace else. Hey, maybe we should tell somebody about this. I think we should tell everybody about this. What just happened?
Okay, I think you all get the point. Let me get back to the screen. I can see everyone. Okay, so basically I showed that video because sometimes like it's hard to like think, okay, what can you do in the situation? But you see, like it's sometimes we get too like caught up in our head, like what could we do? But those are like two like really simple ways that you could intervene. And sometimes it just takes like someone calling attention to the situation. And then if you ask, you can figure out what to do. And you can sometimes, if you don't know what to do, you can ask someone, okay, like what can we do in this situation? And you see that sometimes it takes a whole group to figure out what to do. And in one case, it just took like, okay, we're just not going to deal with this. We're all going to walk away. And sometimes it just takes one person. So I thought that was a good example to show. And the big thing about this one is that, so this was a study done at Cornell, and they showed this video. It's like a 20-minute video to people. And they showed that, the results of the study showed that after a 4-week follow-up survey, they just were able to like, intervene kind of more effectively after that, after watching this video. So we know that bystander intervention does work. Okay, so we did a basically just a short poll, where I live, our group did, because we were just trying to figure out like what stops people from intervening, because we know that sometimes people want to help, but what stops them from helping? And by far and large, the biggest thing people said what stops them from helping is because they don't want to make the situation worse. So they are fearful that they are going to escalate the situation by trying to intervene. And then the next part was that they don't actually want to physically get hurt themselves. And that was really important for us to know, because then we figure out how do we get people to, get past those two things to, actually intervene safely. Okay, so these are just some possible situations. I know we've been talking about them like kind of all throughout, but this is just kind of reiterating on the different situations. So I won't kind of go through them again. Okay, so this is a big one. Like, how will you know if you should intervene? You won't, because I think that's the biggest time. Sometimes we just don't know. But I think the biggest thing is to check in, just ask. So you look and you just ask. A lot of times you can ask the person, like, do you need help? And sometimes it's not clear. And a lot of times, so like in a situation where that, where that girl was drunk, it was really clear that she needed help, and because she was incapacitated and she couldn't like make a decision for herself. And that situation was really clear. But sometimes, sometimes someone will say no because they're scared and they don't really know, how to ask for help. But a good time is just like to actually take a look and to, really survey the situation and figure out if the person needs help. Okay, so this is one that I always like kind of like take some time to like really think about. And so what are the barriers to intervention? And the first one I always say, it's like there's 3 different kind of levels to like what the barriers to intervention are. And the first one is personal. Can anyone think about like what are any personal barriers to intervention? And the first one I give you like is, I think from the poll, was fear. A lot of times people are like really like, they're just scared because they don't want to, make a situation worse, or they are scared that they actually might physically get hurt. Anyone can think about any other, reasons why they personally, would be ambivalent about whether or not they should intervene? Okay. Some others might be their own like intersections, or you just might be like, okay, I'm not sure what to do. Sometimes your own uncertainty about what to do in the situation might be like, okay, I'm not sure what to do, so maybe I should just not get involved. Sometimes you have, sometimes it's your surroundings. You're not sure if it's safe to intervene depending on where you are. You might feel like you're in a vulnerable place, so you might not be able to safely intervene. The next one is relationship. And I feel like this oftentimes is a big one. You might feel like, okay, I am this is my friend, or I'm in community with these people. This is my coworker, or this is my family member. And there might be some negative consequences to me speaking up. So I don't want to get involved because me speaking up may damage the relationship that I have with this person. And that's a big one. But we have to realize that sometimes we can leverage those, relationships, those positive relationships that we have with that person to be able to like intervene more safely because we do have a positive relationship with that person. So sometimes we can flip it on the other end. And then the last one is like kind of general and cultural. So sometimes the cultural gap is that sometimes we don't know what we're not exactly sure what we're witnessing. Or we don't know if it's our place to like step in. So like, let's say, we might see, if I'm a white person, I see some people of color like getting into an argument or, fighting. So I might think, okay, I'm a white person, maybe it's not my place to get in and to get involved or intervene. But, I think an example I always give, I've heard before and it really stuck with me. It was that, someone had seen, two Black men fighting, and they didn't want to get involved in a situation, but they saw a knife fell out of the pocket. They picked up the knife and took the knife with them and they walked away. So they knew, okay, they were fighting, but they were going to both walk away with their lives because a knife was not going to be pulled. So they were going to be okay. And that's a very simple intervention that, at least we know that they were going to be all right. Okay. So these are the things that you want to consider when you are thinking about whether or not you should intervene. You want to think about your race. You want to think about ethnicity, your gender identity, your sexuality, your ability, your immigration status. And I say you want to think about all these things because you want to think about if you have any additional like risk factors for like arrest or being like harassed by like the police. So like if your gender presentation or like if you have a parole status or probation or any kind of warrant, something like that, if you think that police may get involved. So if you have any possession of drugs or alcohol or a weapon, you may want to think about taking less risk. So these are all the things that you want to consider when you think about whether or not you're intervening. So if you have more privilege, then of course it might be more easier and it might be more effective for you to intervene. So these are all the things that you want to consider. Yes, and someone said if they have their son, they're not going to get involved. Yeah, and I think that that's a good one. I think for me, I've learned that, you know, I have my daughter, but she's older now. So I do, if I'm driving, I will stop, but she's very used to, and she knows what to do. Like if I stop the car to like, you know, a lot of times it's like a lot of, you know, people of color getting stopped. So I will still stop the car, but she knows immediately as I get out the car, she's to lock the doors. And I make sure that I stop at a far enough distance away from what's happening, just in case it turns violent. But that's I'm aware of my own privilege when it comes to those situations. And I know the police are less likely to escalate situations when I'm there because of my status in the community. So even though I am a Black woman and a single mom, they still do know who I am. So I have a little bit more privilege in that situation. And my daughter has specific instructions on what to do. And she has a phone and she knows exactly who to call if the situation escalates when I'm outside of the car. So those kind of things we are aware of. So, but that's a very good example. If you have your child with you, you probably are not going to get involved. Okay. Yes, so if you drove by someone on the highway, the car got hit, you call 911 if you're not sure of the exact situation. But sometimes, you know, and oftentimes I don't really put calling 911 in these presentations just because, you know, with police brutality, like really being on the rise, and we have not found a solution yet for this. And we've seen, you know, with the rise of social media, we see so many more people being brutalized by, you know, police officers when they're calling for help because of, you know, their race or their mental health status. A lot of times I say, if there's another way that you can intervene or help, think of that other way, especially if, you know, they are a person of color or if they have a, you know, impaired mental health status. If there's another way that you can help them, please try to consider those ways first. But if you have no other choice, then of course you consider 911, but of course ask for mental health if that's what you need, or ask for an ambulance if that's what you need. You can also request them to not send the police. And a lot of times people don't know that. Please say, we do not need the police, please just send an ambulance. Because automatically, in most cases, the police is just dispatched when you call 911. And a lot of times the police ends up like escalating the situation. Okay, so for intervention, there's almost always something you can try, and you have just a powerful influence just as being a bystander. Sometimes when something's happening, if you just can stand there, that's an intervention just by standing there and watching what's happening. Sometimes people just behave better when they know someone is watching them. I see this so many times with police officers. Sometimes they'll just be on their better behavior because they know that they're being recorded. And a lot of times they're like, oh, you can't record. And it actually is your right to record. They cannot tell you cannot record because they're public officials and you can record them. But what they will tell you is like, they can tell you to move back, but they can't tell you can't record. And it doesn't have to be a huge, you know, action. A lot of times you think that it has to be like this, you know, huge thing, but we just have to make sure that we can intervene to make sure that we're stopping harm. And the more people that, you know, feel empowered to like do bystander intervention, I think that we're going to reduce the amount of people that are being impacted by harm. Oh no, my thing didn't show up. Okay, I'm gonna go back. Okay, for some reason. Okay, I don't know why this didn't show up. My slide for some reason is missing my little graphic. But okay, so I'll tell you what the 5 Ds of intervention are. I think the next one has like an example on it though. So the 5 Ds of intervention are, okay, so it is direct, which means you directly insert yourself into the incident. And the next one is distract. And you'll see that you saw that in the video. So they decided to distract the person that they thought might be causing the harm. Delegate. A lot of times you see that in like situations where you're not sure what to do. So you might ask someone else to do the intervention. So someone that has like more like social power in the situation, you might ask them to intervene, or someone who has more experience intervening in those kind of situations. Delay is another example. So if someone like has been a victim of a crime, you might want to like wait until like an ambulance comes. So that would be like a scenario which delay might be a more appropriate intervention. I'll just go to the next slide because that will help with this. All right, so this is just an example. So you and your day at the movies. You and your day at the movies, as you are moving up the line at the concession area, you see a couple arguing loudly. One of them is grabbing the other firmly by the arm and starts yelling at them through gritted teeth. Given your barriers, what are you most likely to do? And I think that this is important because it gives like, it's just very important so you can kind of figure out what you would do in the situation. So distract. So if you feel like you're more likely and you feel most comfortable with this, and you can figure out just basically in a different situation what you're more likely to do. So if you're more likely to distract, you talk loudly on your cell phone near the couple while looking in the direction of the couple. Direct. So you tell the person to let go of their partner's arm and that they need to cool off for a minute. And the next one, another example is checking with the person whose arm is being grabbed and ask if they're okay. And then the next one is delegate. So you tell the guy behind the register at the concession area, to find the security. So they might just feel more, I'm pretty sure they're more likely to just be familiar dealing with situations like that. So just based on your barriers, one of these things might feel more comfortable for you. And these things will be help. And you knowing your own barriers and be able to check your own privilege might help you to be more able to like intervene. So these things make sense? And I lost my chat box. Okay. I don't see any questions. I'm going to guess that does make sense for everybody. Yes. Okay. All right. Big thing is, especially in situations where you think that the police may get involved or something like that, or the person might need like an ambulance or might need like follow-up, services. Record if you can. Stay with the victim. This is Charlotte's side. I'm all talking. Charlotte, do you want to finish up?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah.
So yeah, you would want to stay with the victim. And I talked to my cousin that went to college that had an experience that she could have used bystander help at the time. And she definitely suggested this one. And I completely agree that we feel very better when we're within nature. We feel more calm. So if there's a tree nearby, obviously we're in the city and stuff, but if you can pull them that way and have them just, kind of be near nature in some way, if it's near, that could be a big help in calming and soothing. Also, though, it can be calming and soothing for anyone. Nature does have a calming effect. They've actually done studies on trees and stuff, and they actually produce a chemical that calms you. So that's actually kind of a cool little thing to know, just in case. One thing is we have a tendency to when someone has been harmed to touch their head and say, it's okay, that sort of thing. So just keep in mind when it comes to someone Indigenous, that they don't want their hair touched quite often. It will actually make the situation worse if you do that. So always ask permission. If you can stay and help file a report and be a witness, please do that. It does make their case stronger if they need to make a case within the system. And sometimes it could just be good to say, can I help you call somebody, or help them escort them home if you can, if you feel comfortable and safe, or if they feel comfortable with that. If they're just right down the street and you're a female, she's a female, or whatever, they feel comfortable, you can do that. Some are not going to feel comfortable, and accept that. Don't try to push it, because that'll make them more uncomfortable.
And I think for the hair thing, I think that's a POC thing.
Yeah.
Yes. Right.
So some things to say, because there are a lot of things to not say. So I think it's better to focus on the positive, is to say things like, I believe you, I'm here, you're safe now. Sometimes when we're in a direct moment in a situation right after, you don't feel safe. So it's good to pull that person back to the present moment to feel safe. Things like, it's not your fault, you didn't deserve this. This is good to start with that, because that's it. A lot of times we will go into that mode. If I had only done this, if I didn't do this, so it's good to get them started immediately. It's not your fault, it's okay, calm down. Even saying, I'm sorry this happened. You want them to feel a little bit more comfortable, comforted, and you kind of have to think of, what would I want somebody to say to me? That's always a good principle to live by. So, boop. The big thing is to listen, let them speak. One of the biggest mistakes I've seen is people say, oh, that happened to me one time. And they go into the story and they don't even listen. And then they kind of one-up them in that traumatic moment, and it does not help. So to be quiet, yeah, they make it about themselves. So to be quiet and just listen, it's important to listen, because you need to know how to proceed. So if it's something kind of minor that upset them, you may not need to do anything, but just listen. But maybe if it involves an assault, a rape, if their drink was drugged or something, in that kind of situation, you're going to have to help them move forward and decide, are you going to report this? Do you need a therapist? That sort of thing. So really, really important to let them speak and not take over the conversation.
Right. And I think it's important to note that sometimes if the person is quiet, that's okay. You can just sit with them. Because sometimes they may be in their head and they're not ready to process anything out loud, but they just need the physical support. So it's okay just to be with the person, because everyone, processes things at different speeds.
Definitely. So when they're done sharing with you in that moment, when they've gone through that sort of thing, definitely offer your support. Try to help them find, if you can, it just depends on the situation. But if you end up in a situation where it's like a college roommate or a friend or a coworker, you're going to be a little bit more involved. So finding resources, crime victims, they're in almost every state, I think. So I know personally in my own life, they help me a lot. So I definitely always push, use crime victims. They have so many resources. They are wonderful. So definitely that's one place to look. Even to get therapists and that sort of thing. You also have to remember, most of us are not therapists. We only have certain capabilities. We also have our own lives. And when someone needs a lot more healing process, depending on the type of trauma that they've experienced, they're definitely going to need the help of a professional. You're not a professional. And sometimes I've experienced it myself where somebody latched on and all of a sudden my whole life was revolving around them. So I had to learn to create a healthy boundary and to help guide them to the right resources. So you definitely want to guide them. One other thing though is not just dumping them. Please come back and check on them, because this is a long process to go through, and it's always good to know that somebody cares. You feel very alone when you go through a traumatic experience. So
yeah, and sometimes it's really difficult to like find resources when you go through something traumatic. And I think we all know that our healthcare system is not the easiest to navigate, and resources are not the easiest to navigate. So sometimes it's really helpful just to have someone that's gonna like sit with you and help you like look through your insurance and figure out, you know, who's taking like, you know, who has openings and things like that, just to have that extra support to help you like navigate those systems. It's really helpful. Okay.
So right here, the statistics are a little surprising, and they do vary depending where you look, but every 20 minutes, someone is physically abused in the United States. About 83% of the Native population has experienced domestic abuse in their lifetime. Men and women experience abuse equally. I'm sorry, not equally, but they do experience it. We talked about this too, that like just the disparity in the resources for the LGBTQ, all that is, the resources and the support is not there. It's very limited. It's really hard to find someone to help. And I do believe that like sharing within the community is really imperative in these moments. There are good therapists out there that can help, that understand. And I think it's important to actually look for them. I know in Binghamton, there's one therapist, she's amazing, and she has helped the community really, really well. So, and I know there's others, I just happen to personally know, but I think it's important to also advocate for those resources for that community as well, because once again, they're also getting the bottom of the pie. They don't get the grants that they need and that sort of thing. So if you can donate or spare time to help them out, that's really important.
And I always say this is generally about, because I am a therapist, when you're looking for a therapist, like, there are lots of different therapists, and you, just like when you're looking for any other type of provider, keep trying them on until you find the right fit, because every therapist is not for everyone. So if you have to try 4 or 5 different therapists until you find the right one, you know, you do that, because you'll know when it is the right fit. Okay. All right. I think this is just, you know, a power and control wheel. A lot of times you don't necessarily like, are not able to like readily identify when something is abuse. So this is really important, just to, you know, look at this and just recognize that there's different kinds of like abuse. So just, you know, coercion and threats, intimidation, emotional abuse, isolation, blaming, minimizing, denial, using children, friends, or loved ones, societal privilege, economic and academic abuse. And then Tiffany, of course, you know, you all as students have access to the counseling center, and they also can provide referrals to therapists outside of BCC or in or near your community.
I do want to say the power and control wheel is what woke me up. Yes. I was in a very abusive marriage for 7 years, and pretty much everything on that wheel I was experiencing. And I didn't realize how bad it had gotten, because it comes in slowly. It doesn't all start in one day. And over the years, it just kept building. And when I went to the women's shelter, they made me sit down and look at this and go over it. And I was mind blown at, that's not me. I would never let anybody do that to me normally. but I was in a marriage with children, and I just allowed this, that I don't want to say I allowed it. It happened to me, but little pieces. Yes, I did allow some of this to go on, and to see what came into my life was very impactful. It helped me move forward to say, that is never happening to me again. So I definitely wanted to include that. I apologize, it's a little bit blurry because we don't know who's going through what right now. And you could be in a situation or have a loved one. If someone who's going through this, it might help to share that with them. So.
Right. And Tiffany shared power and control also happens in relation with family members and friends. It's not only in romantic relationships. It can happen with anyone.
Anyone, yep.
Okay. How to help. This is like a big one. Sometimes we don't really know how to help. So just, be supportive. I think that's the biggest thing. Sometimes when people are in abusive relationships, it's really difficult to leave, and people don't understand that. On average, it takes someone that's in an abusive relationship 7 times to leave. I know that can be very, distressing for, you as a family member or a friend to watch someone go through that cycle. But if you understand that it takes an average of 7 times for someone to leave and stay gone, because I think you have to understand that for that person, when they leave, that is the most dangerous time for them. When they leave is usually when they end up like getting, really badly hurt, or sometimes that's when they end up dead. So if you understand that, sometimes that can help you have more compassion for them in that situation. So really just offer resources, offer support, try not to cut contact with the person. Because I know a lot of times people want to cut contact with them because they're in this abusive relationship or in this abusive situation. But or they try to like have a whole intervention, but research shows that those things are really not effective, and oftentimes that makes them more isolating. That makes the person more isolated, and that is the goal of the person that is abusing them, is to make them more isolated. So don't feed into those kinds of things. Try to really be supportive. A big thing is like safety plans, like let them know that, if they're in a dangerous situation, if they need to get out of it, make sure that they know they can call you, or let them know what the resources are in their community so they can, just be safe. So that's a really important one. We're nearing the end of time, but I know we're at the end. Yes. There's another one. There is like anonymous reporting if there are like children involved. I always say to people like, those are like, worst case scenario. If there are children that are being harmed, please, do your due diligence, but also do know that on the other end of that, if you do report, domestic violence in a home, that a lot of times they do take the children, and sometimes it's very difficult for you to get your child back, because they do hold you responsible for what you expose your child to, even if you are the victim. And even if they do allow you to keep your child, if you have a restraining order against like the person who was abusing you, in most cases, they still do make you have contact with the person who was abusing you to, do visits and things like that. So there's lots of different nuances that a lot of times people are not aware of when there are children involved. And of course you wouldn't know that unless that's the work you do. And I used to work for a crime victims assistance center. So it's really, really difficult. And it's why a lot of times people just stay in a situation because it's very hard to get out of it. So for the last one, it's like, be a friend. Remember, it's not about you. It's a lot of times it's like fear and shame that's keeping them away. And this is resources. And SAMHSA is just like a national helpline. It's not just only for domestic violence. It's just for all, it's a mental health hotline. And they do treatment referrals. So if you need like a referral just for a therapist in general, and it is in English and Spanish. And it's for mental health and substance use disorders as well. I think, and this is BetterHelp. They offer like affordable healthcare, affordable mental health services, like on a sliding scale. Trying to zip through this. This is the DV hotline, and they do do a live chat option or a texting option. So a lot of times it's not safe necessarily for people to like call and things like that. So it's important to know this one. I know we're at time. I'm so sorry. I think because of our, little technical difficulties.
Yeah.
I know it's so much information, but this is your local resources to like New York City, because I know that's where you all are. And
Yeah, Shana, I mean, if at all, what we can do is, just take those slides out of there with all that information, and we can share it with everyone that attended today, including those individuals who registered but weren't able to come in today. So we can share that via email for sure.
yeah, sounds good. I know we're at time, but I don't know if anybody has questions or comments that they just wanted to make. I know we threw.
You can go ahead and stop sharing your screen, so then this way.
Oh,
You
yes.
can see, yeah.
Yes.
Are there any questions? I know you all answered questions in the chat that were popping up in the chat as you went along too. So thank you for that.
And thank you all for being here. I know it was a lot of information, so I hope you all learned some good stuff and will take this, information and, be some great bystanders and teach some other folks some bystander intervention in the future.
And Chanel, this next week we're doing, it's going to be more focused on LGBTQIA, right?
Yes.
On that community. So we're going to have similar and new information, I'm assuming, from this time around. So if you're interested in attending next week's bystander training session, just so you can, a refresher's never bad idea, right? I think. And then to learn more about different communities, it's also good as well.
All right. And there's going to be lots of new information on that one, because we're going to give you the LGBTQIA history. And, so you're going to get that as well. And you didn't get that this time around. So yeah. It will be some review, but there'll be lots of new stuff in there as well. Okay.
Okay, and I mean, if there aren't any questions, thank you all for coming so much. Thank you, Chanel and Charlotte. You are both amazing. Even though Zoom didn't want us to be great, we overcame, right? Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Feel free to show your love in the chat and everything. And thank you all for coming once again. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording.
All right. Thank you, everyone.